If Sonam has helped you, please consider supporting for the benefit of others. Establishing a base engagement is the biggest hurdle for new ideas.
Mindfulness outside of meditation. So I've got this question here asking me to establish an image of someone in their regular life prior to any meditation practice, and then an image of someone whose life has been transformed by very deep meditative insights, specifically in context to the meditation practices of the Waking Up app. In the furthest progressions of our meditation practice, we're discovering a new way of being in the world, which is fundamentally different to how we were previously in the world. And we might access it for a moment, and then it might pass away. And then through training repetitively, we might access this way of being in the world more and more. With meditation, we're working with a very refined shift in our being. A more general and easy way to immediately relate to this idea would be like picking a condition such as, this is going to be an interesting analogy, but I'll go for it. It'd be like if the conditions in your life arose one day that you found really tall shoes, and you realize that by wearing those tall shoes, your life was different. Your life was only subtly different, but it was different nonetheless. Previously, you'd gone through your whole life at a certain height. Maybe the top shelf of a cupboard or a cabinet was always hard to reach. And you realize when you put on these shoes, your life was different. The experience you're having in the world was substantially different. Now you could get access to a new shelf, which was really high up because you got these tall shoes on. With meditation, it's a bit different because sometimes the shoes are being taken away from you, or you don't know how to wear the shoes. But the system of something changing in your life or your experience due to certain conditions, changing your relationship to the world, is exactly the same. How this would look in meditation is you might receive hints that there's some deep insights you can have. You hear that there's these concepts about NoSelf or enlightenment, living with the awakened mind. And what you might eventually discover is that through meditation, you sit down, you feel as you normally do, and then after a while of meditating, it feels different to be you. Your experience of being in the world shifts in a fundamentally new way. So you're sitting down, you're relaxing, you're meditating as normal, maybe you're watching your breath, and then something happens in your mind where your relationship to you and your breath, or your relationship to whatever else you're meditating on, shifts. There's an insight, and you think to yourself, oh wow, this is different to how it usually is. The challenge with meditation is normally that's hard to stabilize. So normally after that shift happens, we would go back to feeling like we normally do. Oh, I'm just paying attention to my breath. Then maybe we have more insight, shift. Oh, this is different. This isn't how it normally feels like to be me in relationship to my breath. Something has shifted here. You might then practice and stabilize that shift which is happening. And that shift, which might be shifting into an awakened way of being, or a step towards enlightenment, or NoSelf, or headlessness. Those are all synonyms. They're all the same insight. That is compatible, just like the shoes are, it is compatible with your regular waking life too. It's easier to notice it during meditation because it demands a very subtle or nuanced awareness of us, paying attention to what it's like to be us in every moment. Usually in our lives, we're just distracted. We don't really know where our mind is, or we're not paying attention to anything. We use meditation to discover this insight about something about the nature of being us, which we're always being us, because the usual obstacle to this insight is not paying attention or being distracted. Usually in our life, we're always existing, we're always being, but we have no recognition of being at all. We've got no awareness of where we are. We can sort of dream at night, for instance. This is another example. We dream throughout our whole night and we're still there. And we do these crazy things. We might have a dream where we're flying an elephant. And it's not until we wake up that we realize we were dreaming. So there's still this experience of flying on the elephant, another weird analogy. But it's not until we wake up we realize we were just completely lost in this dream. And this is the same sort of thing we eventually notice with meditation when we sit down and practice in a still environment without coarse distractions or physical things in the world to get more distracted or more diffused in, without televisions or computer screens to tune out from. We realize that when we sit down and start paying attention to what it's like to be us moment to moment, meditating, or paying attention to what it's like to be us on an object like our breath, just feeling the sensations, not getting distracted, not becoming diffused, we realize that our usual way of being in the world is distracted or diffused. And there's another way of being which has more awareness, more presence, to recognize what it's like to be us moment by moment. And eventually we can have insights into NoSelf or headlessness or the enlightened way of being, which show us that we're usually overlooking an aspect of our being throughout our regular walking life. We can then take that insight that we see whilst we're meditating, sustain it, and then we can access that or make that our primary relationship to the world when we're walking around, doing our job or being with people, being with family. We can have being and awareness as our primary relationship as we exist in the world, rather than being distracted or being diffused. In relating to ourselves or being ourselves and relating to other people, there's two main sort of transitions or transformations that will seem very meaningful to us once we realize this insight from how we usually are in the world. We might be interested in this insight for other reasons. It might just also be fascinating that there's something we haven't noticed about ourselves. But there's two clearly immediately appropriate and recognizably useful transformational things for us to realize in glimpsing or understanding or embodying the NoSelf, headless way of being in the world. One is that all suffering we experience in the world arises on the condition of having a head or having a self or being distracted or diffused in the world. Whenever we're suffering, we're having the experience of a self which is in war with its current experience. It's actually quite self-explanatory. We're moving around in the world and say we smack our hand on something accidentally, or our expectations aren't met. Whatever description you want to use of suffering in our life, it's always an experience of ourselves being at war with the way the circumstances are, or being at war with our experience. Something's happening in our experience and we're at war with that. Even in that description, that clearly requires a self to be at war with the experience. If we discover the insight that the self is an illusion, it's something we can actually be in the world without, and we sustain that way of being, there's no longer any self to arise to become at war with its experiences. We're present in a way in which we no longer become confused and distracted into experiences of agitation, frustration, or sufferable sadness. We no longer have any of the experiences which are being lost in, convinced, contrived, and contracted into the experience of, I don't like this. This is uncomfortable. I want to stop this. Those experiences can't arise if we recognize the prior condition to those contracted ways of being and sit in presence. Thoughts can still come, but then they'll flow on by. And rather we will rest harmoniously with what is, the changing experiences as they're all transient and floating by. That will be what it's like to be us. This manifestation of moving consciousness spontaneously, moment by moment, rather than having experiences and judging them. That's the contrived way of being. So that's one really transformational result of gleaning the NoSelf insight of meditation. The other overtly positive consequence of this way of being is that a lot of those conditions of self are also the reasons why we're not positive influences to other people in our lives. Again, we're having experiences of ourself, or we're becoming agitated in rooms, which mean that we can't behave the most abundantly or lovingly or equanimous or peaceful with people around us that we really love. It's just a simple observation, how much better could we be in the world if we were selfless, if we weren't getting agitated or frustrated or fed up, if all those negative experiences disappeared. We would obviously be more available to be more compassionate, to meet the needs or serve loved ones or others around us. There would be no resistance of ourself there to get in the way of how we can be with other people. The alternative is we could be this harmonious flow without any self-interest if we can understand the no-self thing. Some of the more in-depth ideas that the Waking Up app will mention too are ideas about free will and also putting a real emphasis on the value of the qualitative dimensions of our being, which just means that, how we feel is it has reality to it. And it should really be placed up in the value scale of our lives. Sometimes we value our jobs and behave as though career or relationships are more important than how the people feel. And that should really be top priority. We want to live in a world where everyone who's conscious has the best experiences, rather than in the world where everyone who's conscious has the worst experiences. And that idea tied in with the final conclusions of free will, where you realize that where we end up in our conscious qualities, whether they're good or bad, are a lot more to do with luck than to do with it being our own responsibility, is supported also very nicely by the compassionate conclusion we come to know or understand when we experience or realize being a moment of no self in this world. We can start to understand that the reason why others suffer is not because of any fault of their own, but because they have a misunderstanding or a lack of insight. In Buddhism, the term is ignorance, but not a scolding ignorance, just literally a missing of wisdom, that available for us in every moment that we are, the nature of being us, is that there is a place to be completely free of suffering. And we just haven't been shown that yet. But if we discover that, or we are shown that, we discover ultimate compassion for other individuals out there who experience a world of meaning, but of moments of suffering and of not nice ways to be there. And our lives prior to finding real freedom is an oscillation of meaning, but of also pain and suffering. And the deepest insights of meditation do find an antidote to that, where compassionately we can see others suffering and feel compassion because they're suffering needlessly to some extent. We need to, this is what our next job, we have to create the conditions. Like right now, we have to communicate with others, we have to be interested and create the conditions to resolve suffering. But very much in the Buddhist context, the idea is that we can end suffering. We just need to share the wisdom. I wish and I hope that something I've said here has been wise for you. But there's a lot of terms going on, and it's nice to approach these things slowly. But I think I've kind of elaborated and gone over a couple times the shifts and the differences there and the importance of the possibility of what can be realized through deeper meditation. It's not just about something that happens on a cushion, it's just an easier environment to locate something, which is then useful for the rest of your life. But maybe if you rewatch it, that will just flesh it out again. I'll probably make a lot more sense a second time of you watching me, perhaps. And if not, let's just keep communicating with each other. You can, anyone out there watching this video, you're free to leave a prompt for me to explain something more. Best wishes, and may all sentient beings out there find freedom and peace. May we all connect to a more present way of being in the world. Simply being, experiencing more moments of being, and really discern the difference between being and becoming distracted or diffused, which become the ultimate causes for suffering. May we all find that space of freedom in a meaningful way and not overlook it in our lives. Best wishes, my friend.